Welcome. I'm Lindsay. I am president of Learning Roundtable and chair of Learning Roundtable's online learning committee. Thank you so much for joining us today for training exploration topics you love. What do we got here? I got an icebreaker to get us going. Feel free to unmute or pop your response into the chat. I can share my first library job. So I think my first library job was as a substitute circulation clerk at a public library in an affluent community in Southern California, and there was a 3-day hold shelf and a 5-day hold shelf. And I only worked there like once a week or once every other week because I was literally a substitute on call. And sometimes I put a book on the wrong hold shelf and I'd get a scolding for it. And I'm just like, I don't know what to tell you about this. Why do you have two hold shelves? So, anyways, that's one of my first memories. Anyone else have a good memory of something they wish to have been trained better on?
I had a first job, first technical, very non-traditional library job in high school. There was a tutoring center. They wanted a quote unquote librarian to organize their stuff. So no training, and I pretty much got to decide what I wanted to do. But it was really cool because I had it on my resume and it got me an internship down at Adult Swim in Atlanta for Cartoon Network, because they had an archive like a library of their TV shows, and they needed people to run copies of things from their archives back and forth. And so again, very non-traditional. I'm not even sure up to any kind of standards or any kind of best practices, but I could be wrong. Um, and then because I had library twice on my resume, I got a grown-up real life job at a public library. And it's sort of that Goldilocks, not too cold, not too hot, not too cold kind of perfect situation. So I've made a career here in Georgia doing that for Gwinnett County Public Library.
Very cool. You're also welcome to use the chat as well. I've got the chat open. If you want to ponder this for a moment, we can also move on with the opening slides. A little bit about Learning Roundtable. We do have a few hundred members. We're all about training and development, hence our training icebreaker. We do have some cool stuff happening at ALA Annual. Registration opens on Wednesday, I believe, February 19th. They're doing a training showcase. You can talk to people that do training and development, and people have good ideas about training and development. We're doing a member social, and we're doing a panel on careers in training and development. And we are currently asking for proposals for webinars for our online learning committee. If you'd like to share your training expertise, we would love to hear all about it. You can be a beginner, you can be advanced, you can be looking for more ideas, and we would love to hear it and participate with you in helping you build your training expertise and building our community's training expertise. Thank you for being here. All right. So you're welcome to contribute to the icebreaker still. Probably could have kept that for last. But I do have a question to get us started today for topics we love on this fine Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, by the way. What's a training topic that you're passionate about that you wish got more attention in library professional development? I already said my piece about 3-day versus 5-day hold shelves, and I'll hold a grudge forever. That was like 20 years ago now. So what do you all have? What training topics do you love?
So I'm going to pop in here with it's I'm kind of a new training baby as far as things are concerned with my library. So I don't have a lot of expertise to give to everybody, but I feel like this one will sort of answer this question and also sort of answer the icebreaker question, as far as like one of your first early memories in libraries. I have, whenever I first started in libraries, gosh, 2013. I was straight out of college. I was excited. I was a part-time youth assistant, and I worked at a place where nobody really talked about taking your breaks. Like it was like, maybe do it, but if it's inconvenient for us, yeah, maybe don't. And that's one that I really wish I had gotten into that habit. That would have been nice. I still kind of struggle with it sometimes, and I think about it now. I'm better about like thinking about it for other people. I mean, like, have you taken your break? But still bad at it.
Yeah, that's a really good one. It's like those like unspoken mores of working in a new place. It's as important as knowing your job, like knowing like to take care of yourself and take a break every now and then. Yeah, I've worked a lot of places where it's like you only got a break if you smoked, hospitality industry. So yeah, it's not cool. Everyone needs a
I
break.
think in the age of post-COVID, though, there's a lot of emphasis on self-care. And I mean, not to be too negative about it, but there's only a limited number of things on a checklist that people feel comfortable telling you how to self-care. Otherwise, you're tiptoeing into like, medical advice. But the whole take your breaks, go for a walk, have some tea, like all that kind of stuff. Um, and when I talk to new employees, um, because that's one of my specialty hour areas, which I can talk later about, but um, I'm pretty direct with how exhausting working with the public is. I don't know if you were working in public libraries at the time, but like, yeah, um, this is exhausting. You have to be on all day. Your job is to be nice to people all day, helpful, knowledgeable, but nice to people all day. And that can be very wearing over time. And I don't like to pigeonhole people too much as, oh, you're all introverts, right? Because that's not necessarily true. I'm not. I deviate from that, but um, you do need to recharge in order to be on, especially if you have a negative exchange with a customer or something like that. Like that really comes into play. So, even though it sounds like a very small, don't forget to take your breaks, it can be worked into training. It can be worked into orientation material, if that's something that is on your mind or something that you guys have connection to.
Casey, I just want to jump and kind of piggyback on what y'all are talking about a little bit. One of the things I just put in the chat was when I arrived at my library 3 years ago, everybody knew what the code of conduct was, but they weren't super familiar with what does that mean for me as a frontline employee versus my manager versus my, whatever, my other colleague, and which situations am I responsible for enforcing, and then how do I do that? So I think really like training and not only empowering people to like take good care of yourself and because you are everything you said, Casey, like it's exhausting being on constantly customer service. It is a hard job. It is service, and so stepping away is just obviously we know now so important. That's what we're talking about, and making sure that people have those parameters and that permission to do that. But then also like let's train them on how do you deal with confrontation. I feel like this is something that we avoid, because a lot of us are, introverted and some, yes, and de-escalation, Melissa,
Mhm.
absolutely. Like just, equip me with having those difficult, because I know we're going to have them. I mean, we know that there are difficult people that are going to come in the door. And I think sometimes that's hard for us to just tackle head on. So I really appreciate any kind of training and
Mhm.
documents where it's like, hey, here's what you say when you have to tell somebody to leave the library because they have a body odor problem.
Yeah.
It's horrible, but tell me the words to use so that I at least have a starting off point. So anyway, just wanted to share those thoughts.
You know, we definitely get asked a lot for topics like that, and I think in our profession you'll see that as a recurring request for we need more, we need more, we need more. Um, I kind of been thinking about that, and I feel like there is a lot of good content out there. It just deserves a repetition. Not so much new tricks. Um, I don't know, like if you really look at what's out there, a lot of people point to the Rindau training as like the be all end all, and actually a lot of his stuff is pretty dead on and pretty great. But even if you narrow it down to like, I know some people like acronyms to help you remember steps and things like that. You might find something that speaks to you as far as like what to do. But a lot of the advice is repeated from thing to thing, almost like the self-care stuff kind of is a repetition. It's just muscle memory, experiences, willingness to try and even fail and try again. I think we as a profession are worried about getting a bad grade, and doing the wrong thing. And that's very hard because this is where I think training butts up against managing and coaching. And for the people who provide training to work with the managers and the teams about where that line might be. Because those requests do come through and they come through all the time. I won't say it's like my favorite topic to cover, but I found ways to cover it in a pleasant way for new employees, just so we don't hear during exit interviews or if there are like situations where people have action forms, yeah, role playing and things like that are great for new employees and existing employees, but matching situations, we have hypotheticals that we think are pretty normal, like that we've pulled from incident reports and things like that. So speculation, and people like to tell a imaginary fake person what to do. So that's a really great technique for de-escalation and things like that. But I really think if people are asking for more, I think the more is the repetition and the reinforcement, not so much, there's got to be a different way to do it. Not all the time. If you really looked at the material that's out there and you've looked, um, at what's available within our confines, because we have at least in our library, I mean, we really just have, excuse me, please don't do that, versus calling the police. And so like you have such a wide range of response, like it's like the big button, the big eject button, or excuse me, please don't do that. Like, and that really puts us in a tough spot. And just recognizing where staff roles end and 911 comes in, like I think is a big one for us. Reinforcing that people are not going to be in trouble for calling 911 in good faith. If they were raised like me, I don't even mean just for my parents, but like just that overarching, like, don't call unless it's an emergency. And you're like, oh, is this an emergency? And then you start to get the self-doubt. So we talk about that. We talk about that very openly in staff groups to get people to be responsive rather than passive. So yeah, it's always a work in progress.
All right, I've got another question if y'all ready for it. What training topic never fails to energize you when you're designing or delivering it? What makes that topic special for you? We've talked about onboarding a bit in our online learning committee meetings, and I hadn't really thought too much about onboarding, I don't know, in recent memory, but when I was an academic librarian, there was no onboarding. There's just here's your job, here's your office. I don't know. They literally told me, you tell us what your job is. This is my first librarian job, and it was the first I was the first instructional design librarian. They hadn't had one before. And they're like, you tell us what your job is. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Anyways, after a couple of years there, I ended up collaborating with a bunch of my colleagues to create a like a handbook for new librarians and new library workers. And it's just like every question you could possibly have, including a list of, I called them library isms, like the acronyms that the library used. And I was reminded of this just a couple weeks ago, and my friend from that library, she's like, do you still have that list? And I was like, oh my God, I do, because I'm like a digital hoarder, basically. I still have all this stuff, including the handbook. But I mean, it's all that stuff I wish I knew, and is up to and including like, where's a good place to get coffee on campus? Where's a good place to get lunch? Is all those little things that are kind of hard to pick up. So I realized I was like re-energized all over again. Like, oh yeah, my onboarding was terrible. I didn't last there. Well, I lasted there 4 years, but it's really important to onboard someone well so they have a really good experience. Those first impressions are so powerful. And I was reminded of that and reviewing this handbook I created years ago. So how about all of you? Any training topics that get you real riled up or excited?
I'll just add, because I did a presentation last year a few times about onboarding, offboarding. Did it at our Kansas conference. There's been a great book that just came out about onboarding and offboarding, just some HR stuff. And I thought people really liked talking about that. My last slide had nothing that I really was able to talk about, but here's all the other topics that we didn't get to, just to show that like this was just a small piece of the puzzle. I'll look up the title in a second. Um, but what I was going to say is like overarching is like what I see about the onboarding part is like remembering how I felt when I started and being in that position where I was thinking like, oh, I made a bad mistake. I shouldn't have left the school district. This is not going to be great. And you know, they could have done a lot better. So I was going to say is like those times when you can kind of empathize with and putting yourself in that position, like that always kind of makes training seem more important to me is because we were really just focusing on like the feelings behind it all.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is that this is something I've had to learn to train myself to do in training and development is remember feelings are important. I was always that like real bookish person where I'm like, well, if you just give them the content and like tell them why it's important, like they're just going to learn it, right? Like, no, feelings are so important. Motivation is so important. Yeah, you want people to feel good when they start, and that's something it's easy to forget. I'll say too, a couple of years ago, I had a terrible offboarding experience. My boss didn't even acknowledge that I was quitting, basically. It was terrible. And I'm like, she gave me some valuable leadership lessons. I will tell her that if I ever see her again. A real failure in leadership.
We recently reformatted the way we do onboarding, and we have 2 days. Not everybody has the time luxury that I think my library invests in training for new employees, but if you can do it, I recommend it. But we have our first 2 days where it's like ready for liftoff, get them everything they need in order to be useful immediately. So that's like I need to sign people up for cards. I need to know how to search the catalog. What is a catalog? Like getting them ready to be useful immediately. And then every quarter we look back and whoever we hired across 3 months that we did the immediate liftoff trainings, we bring them back for a quarterly part 2. And this has been interesting. We've just done our first round of this format because you get to hear like the first really almost entire morning of the first day that we did it. Tell us library stories. Tell us what you've seen. Did it match your training? Um, Anything that you find unusual or because that did I make a mistake feeling that you told us thing A, but we're doing thing B. You're not going to get that unless they're in front of you. Even when you do it online, I feel there's a missing component of proximity. Um, and I think that ability to have that look back, that reflective time with staff. And it also allowed us to get a little bit deeper into library skill sets as opposed to letting the managers handle that only. So things like looking up book lists, award winners, um, different readers advisory scenarios and reference scenarios and things like that. Um, Kind of getting people in touch with why it's a profession and not just a job. That's, I think, very difficult when you're dealing with some frontline employees, especially, I think, post-COVID and high turnover. To have a little bit of training that's standardized, that gets at the heart of like why this is a profession. So I don't know if any of you all do anything like that at your locations.
Well, I find this very interesting, and Casey, you're making my like brain go a mile a minute here. I love all this onboarding and that there's so much experience within this group. I am currently I work for a consortia. My name is Crystal Vella. Excuse me, I was a little tardy. My name is Crystal Vella, and I work for the Swan Consortia in Illinois. And we um, have about 100 libraries in our consortia to this date. So my job is a little bit different. I'm the training and development consultant here. And so it's not like I get to just concentrate on a library or even a few libraries, I have to like think huge and how can I help 100 libraries all at once? So that kind of really gets me fired up. Right now we're looking at our onboarding stuff, so it's really cool to hear everyone's experience and all the knowledge that's in this room. So I know I'll be picking some brains later. But we're looking at, we've seen such high turnover, right? Especially after COVID with um, circulation managers and just, libraries trying to just consolidate departments and, bringing tech services with CERC or tech services with adult reference. So we're trying to now figure out kind of like an onboarding checklist. Like, what do you need to know? And that is proving to be so large and slightly overwhelming. We're plugging along. I run these like working groups within the consortia for circulation specifically. And last year did a big push to get like some best practices and a mentor program growing, and which has been really great and helpful for new managers. I started working with Swan. I started in a Swan library as a public library, in a public library as a like circulation clerk, and it was really once I became like a circulation manager, they had this at the time. Swan would like, they'd send you to like this full day and it's intensive and it's all day. And you go and you get all this information. And then I don't know about anyone else, but I promptly forgot all of it and was completely overwhelmed the second I left. And so when I started working with Swan, I was like, that does not work. Like it doesn't work for everybody. And then you end up having more questions, and as the trainer, you almost feel like, man, I sent you all of that or I did all of that and it's not being retained. So how can I change this? So that's like what gets me fired up is like how to help um, people gather the information, like what's the most important things that they need to know to like you were saying, Casey, like hit the desk, like how to be helpful immediately, and then how to, get into like the nitty gritty of the job and things. At Swan, when we started online learning was something that kind of COVID pushed us into. And so without being able to go to 100 libraries all the time or anything like that, I've tried to develop those kind of role-playing scenarios within the online courses. The software we use makes it really easy to do those kinds of things where you kind of like develop the scenario and then you as the learner can pick A or B and then you can give feedback based off of, those types of things. I'm sure we've all seen those interactive kind of scenarios, but that's also been very helpful and I love making those. They're a bit of a labor of love, but they are super helpful from my understanding from the when we get our feedback from the courses. Everyone's always really responsive to those. So whether you're doing it in person or in some online version, I think that those are really cool too. Oh, thanks. I see some links and stuff coming in. I'm gonna be quiet now and look at those. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Crystal, you mentioned checklists, and that is where I'm living right now. So yeah, this is the position I've been hired into, brand new position for our system, and the first charge is like we just need training checklists, and so I'm coming up on my third month in, and what I've been living in almost this whole time is trying to go through I mean, it's a blank slate, right? So I'm trying to go through all of our positions, the duties and responsibilities on everyone that's listed, and kind of figuring out how, like, what's actually happening on the ground as far as how things are structured. And like, then that's going to be like, what can we train on? And, or if someone's going from one position to another, what do we need? And how can I make that into checklists? So it's happening. It's slowly happening, but what energizes me the most whenever I find it. Well, one, whenever somebody asks a question, I'm like, I have the answer. And then the other one is just whenever I've been finding, just we're a system, we've seen some rapid growth over the last like 10 years. And I think just part of that is, sometimes things get tangled and we're finding out like, well, this position does this and there's this one over here. And I'm finding places where like we're going to be able to make positions a little bit more fair for people. And so that gives me a lot of motivation just to be like, hey, like, the things we do, not only are we training people, but like I'm going to be able to help like keep people's day to day more efficient somehow. Ooh, I'm seeing more links in here too. I get excited when I see it.
Well, I can tell you a lot of our communicating around onboarding expectations with branch management, the people who are waiting for their new employees. They're like, we have holes in our schedules, we need bodies, that kind of a thing. Is to make it clear what's in it for them. I think most of our team kind of understands, or it's so normal for them that it's better to wait a couple days and get somebody who can function rather than have the training dumped on them to have a person shadow who doesn't have all the functionality down yet. It's good for the new employee to have time to concentrate without being under a spotlight, to get to know the new stuff, because we still see some people who struggle with technology, but they have skills or talents in other areas that make a good addition to our team. And so just reminding people what's in it for them and then what we need in return. Of course, we want people to be trained and know how to do the tasks, but we want them to understand that they're part of a system, the larger goals of the library, and that we are a profession. So it's sort of a give and take that way. And I think most people can accept that if you lead a little bit with the what's in it for them. We're also experiencing, I think, some struggle with cultivating management. So, turnover has affected the management layer. We have promoted people who were good at their previous station, so they need to level up. And it's part of the natural process that you have people new in their position who don't have the depth of experience. So I would say my attention has been focused between general onboarding and finding resources for supervisory and managerial development. Sometimes leadership development, but also really actually just that middle layer, and finding resources for those. So that has been taking up a lot of my attention too. I don't know if anybody else in here has been doing any projects related to that.
I'll jump in. I was trying to give somebody else a chance to chat, but Crystal and Casey, you both touched on something that I threw in the chat, but something that we're working on and that I'm personally passionate about and I enjoy working on too is the professional development piece. Crystal, I think you mentioned that you guys are working on developing a mentoring program. And that's something that, yeah, cool. Our library is just developing that as well, because we get lots of requests to job shadow. We've got about 180 employees, so several different departments. Love to hire from within if possible, but we're finding that, folks that are brought up through circulation really are not super knowledgeable about what happens in adult services or youth services or outreach. And we were kind of surprised by that because, we're obviously all here in the same building. But if your libraries are anything like ours, we've navigated silos over the years, and especially throughout COVID and, bad managers and directors and things like that. So just trying to bring some cohesion to the organization through job shadowing and mentoring programs. And so that's something that our staff trainer I almost started typing like, I wish my staff trainer, she's really the expert and should be here. But anyway, she's got tons of great materials, and I will ask her if we can share those with you and email those to the group. And then she's also developing these 2 new procedures about those. But I really find that when you have a brief conversation with your employees about their long-term professional goals, not necessarily related to the job that they're in now, but just like, long-term. And again, any kind of movement, I always view movement is good for the organization. And if you're hiring from within, hopefully it's all a positive thing. So I love to talk about that with my people because it gets them fired up. And I find that they are more committed to their work, knowing that I'm invested in trying to get them to to become a librarian or to become the next assistant manager. Because when they move on, that creates positive movement for the rest of the department, right? And then that gives the opportunity for somebody else to. So I love talking about those kinds of things and growth and strategically planning. Where do you want to be in the next 5 years? Because how can we all benefit from your personal professional goals, So
That's really smart, I think, Erin. Because not only it creates this like bond and trust that your employees then have with you to help them reach their goals. And that is what makes a satisfying workplace. Not every job is invested in you as a person and your long-term goals and your professional goals. Um, I used to be a manager and I used to do something. We didn't get to do like a formal review process, but every year I would sit down with employees and do something similar. Like, okay, what are we working towards? Are we working towards, some where we're just like, I'm just here to retire. I need to retire. Okay, great. Let's make that nice and smooth for you. How can we do that? And somewhere had different goals and different aspirations. And um, still, I'm many years away from that position, and I've seen my past employees move up, move into the position that I had, which was really cool to see. And they still keep in touch and, reach out. Oh, this is what I've done. I completed my degree. I'm a, you know, biomedical engineer now and stuff like that. So it's like it's really nice to, even if they didn't live in library land, it was a stepping stone for them or something that they used just to get by or whatever the case was. You still build those relationships and it's nice to see, those being built and have those things with people and generations, to come. So yeah, that's really cool. That's awesome to hear you doing that. I love that.
We are doing something a little experimental to try and boost I guess it's a little bit mentor, it's a little bit uh prepping the pre-management level. And we're doing a level up boot camp, people who might be interested in supervisory positions so they can better understand what we look for. It's not just interview prep, although that's part of it, but understanding the business, understanding management. A lot of folks who are good at their jobs did not get management schooling of any kind, and they may not understand what it takes to manage people. Also, we have people who've come to work to the library, work at the library from other lines of work where maybe they have been managers, and that's an untapped, like maybe they didn't see themselves as librarians, that they may have that skill set. So we're going to see how this cohort goes. We've got a couple workshops lined up or sessions lined up where we're going to talk about specific topics, one of which is HR concerns, specific like red tape stuff, like stuff that managers need to care about. So nobody's in hot water, and getting people to kind of think in terms of that level of responsibility so that they are prepared and know what they're asking for. It's one thing to be good at your frontline position and want to be paid more for it, but what we're actually hiring for is a different position. And to actually clarify that with the people going for it is a challenge sometimes. And we're hoping to cultivate relationships. So by offering this kind of training. So
I love hearing all this conversation about developing people, figuring out where they want to go. It's good management, right? And it shows like a lot of builds that trust between a manager and an employee. Like you really want what's like best for me and understand I'm not going to be here forever. I recently left. I was part-time at Arizona State University in the Human Resources Office on the talent development team. And Arizona State University is massive. They have like 4 campuses just within Arizona, thousands of employees, and they're moving towards really figuring out at like an institutional level how to develop employees so that they stay at ASU. And they do have several leadership programs, and they also have this huge job architecture project they just completed where with thousands of employees, none of the job titles are standardized. So they went through and they figured out what competencies were required for each job, and they gave each job like a back end title. So the goal for them is to help employees identify pathways for growth at Arizona State, recognizing they may not stay in their department, but also recognizing it's a huge brain drain for these people to leave Arizona State if they can't see a pathway to stay within Arizona State. So that's a really cool thing they did. And then the team I was on, the talent development team, we had 3 leadership development programs. The first one was the supervisor development program, and it's for people that weren't supervisors but maybe wanted to be. And it was mostly an online curriculum that helped redevelop when I was there. Then like a capstone, they come in person and talk about their goals. And it was really like it was half like here's what to expect if you're a supervisor, and there's also half like rah rah Arizona State, you want to work here and stay here forever. And the next level they had for leadership programs was a supervisor development program. Is for brand new supervisors, if they're even just supervising like one student, they could participate in this, and it was like a monthly meeting. And then for people that are like assistant director or director levels, it was mastering leadership, and they work on these like institutional wide projects as part of like a group as with other assistant directors. But I really liked that they had this like supervisor development program. It's like a little baby, like you want to be a supervisor, here's some basic supervisor skills and kind of what to expect from it. So I really liked that philosophy of trying to keep people at Arizona State, especially like I don't know about any other places that you all work, but you know the pay is abysmal. But you have the pride of working at ASU, and so they're trying to keep people there, and I thought that was a nice thing to do.
I saw 2 things in the chat that might be interesting to just touch on that are not strictly staff development, I don't think. Somebody mentioned AI and somebody mentioned oral history. So can you tell us a little bit about that as far as subject matters for training and maybe what you love about it?
Yeah, Erin, that was you for the
Yeah,
AI.
the AI was me, and I think oral histories was Dan. So I didn't know. Dan, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Go for AI. Let's do it.
Okay, so really my interest in AI, kind of to piggyback on what Lindsay's saying, is a lot of for supervisors. So I just took a Project Management Institute course about AI for project managers, but it's really for supervisors really of all levels that it could apply to. And just really how, I think, rightly so in libraries, we've got, some healthy apprehension about using AI, and we need to be aware of all the ethical, dilemmas that we potentially arise. But I do find that in my day-to-day work, it is an incredibly useful tool. I think that it is something that we should be training all of our supervisors to use. It's an incredible communication tool. I run a lot of my emails through ChatGPT and I'll throw in huge email chains between huge parties and be like, okay, this is what I think I want to summarize, and then it's incredible the amount of time that it can really save a supervisor. Obviously, the end product is still your responsibility, but what it does is it does a lot of the grunt work for you. The high level oversight is still absolutely necessary. You are still needed as a manager and a super, this, I'm speaking to the concerns about AI that it's going to replace us essentially. And I really want to advocate for it and learn more about it as a tool that we can use in our day-to-day life, whether that's, quickly reading statistical reports and, sorting data for us into usable information, or helping with emails and communication and things like that, and fact checking and spell check, whatever. So I love it. Obviously, I'm super into it and excited about it. And so if you guys have tips or tricks or suggestions for learning more about that, I'm all ears.
Yeah, I'm an interest in AI too. It's definitely a developing field. I totally agree. It's not going to replace people. It's a great time saver, and I think it's going to be able to free us up a lot for more of those human interactions, which you can't rush a conversation with somebody. But if you can use AI to help you get through your email quicker, that's just a wonderful, wonderful productivity tool. Yeah, I agree.
Writing reports, like I helped it write like our long-term planning strategic report to our board, and I just threw in tons of documents and data and information. And what it did was it built out a framework for me that would have literally taken me hours. So it creates this launch pad that I feel like is just amazing. And I love it. Yeah.
We did some AI training with a colleague. So we were training library staff about maybe how they could use it, how patrons might use it, what kind of questions. And we did it for Topeka and Shawnee County Public Library, a morning, 2 morning sessions. And our joke was we had to adapt our presentation for the second session because AI is changing so quickly. But that is what we found over like the 9 months that we gave that presentation to various different groups for staff days is, and that can be kind of what's difficult is staying ahead of all of those changes, especially from that like 2023, 2024 period where you were having like, now there's Claude AI, now there's Perplexity, what are we doing with visual AI and all of the repercussions of that. So it can definitely be a challenge to kind of stay in front of it and maybe focusing on the like how you can start incorporating this into your life rather than trying to go down the nitty gritty of like which model is the model to use is what we found. But yeah, I if I'm going to blast an email out to across the state, then it's probably going through chat gpt first just to make sure that there's no glaring mistakes, and I just use it like as a brainstorming tool like you're saying. And sometimes I do bounce things between like this is what Claude AI gave me, let's shoot it over to chat gpt because I'm not paying for these things. So just kind of seeing which model sees the problems with the other one did. And I think it makes myself just look at my writing in fresh light. And I'm using a lot more. I always love bullet points, but I think I'm using a lot more emojis as bullet points and really getting to the point and nitty gritty and tearing away because you only have that limited time to get people's attention and to make sure they get the important information. So it's definitely a tool. I just try to not use it as a crutch, I guess, and like hopefully I'm not becoming dumber as it's like I'm just brain fog and depending on an AI overlord.
Yeah, I agree. It's great at breaking down information to make it really skimmable. I could also dump in like scholarly articles and I'll be like, does this mean what I think it means? And it's like, yes, or it's like, no, or explains things to me. I do worry about the loss of the human voices. I'm teaching an instructional design graduate class right now, and I have a student that's clearly using it for her assignments. Oh, I had a former student email me to ask me for a letter of recommendation. That's like, and her message starts, I hope this message finds you well. And I'm like, listen, I can tell you're using ChatGPT. It doesn't make me feel good. Does it make you feel good? And I had to talk to one of my other students in the class I'm teaching. I'm like, I can see you're using AI. Are you comfortable with sounding like AI? Like even if you're only using it to like zhuzh up your writing, I have some concerns about that. So it always come back to the human. Like let's use this as a productivity tool. I love it for helping us communicate better, but I also like I'm afraid of losing my own voice if I use it too much. And the same thing for my students. Yeah, I'm a doctoral student too, and I'm focusing on generative AI for my dissertation. I'm going to be developing an AI training for graduate students on generative AI specifically. And I'm like, it's like a horrifying thought. How do I develop a training but then keep it evergreen? So I'm really going to focus on how AI works and then the ethics of it and not really go into specific models. So I think that's really important for AI training in general is that if you want to be able to reuse this stuff and not waste people's time teaching them one specific thing that's going to go away next week, oh my God, it's like technology on steroids. I always had this problem with technology and recording a video and how to do something. And as soon as you publish it, it changes and you feel a little enraged. Yeah, AI is definitely making that so much worse. I love doing AI training and I also hate doing AI training because it changes so fast. All right, I've got more guiding questions if we would like to move on. So this point might be a good segue. So next one, think about your library's most popular training sessions. What topics seem to spark the most interest and enthusiasm among staff? AI, huge, always well attended. Whenever I do a training on AI, it's very well attended. I'll also say anything related to productivity. I even did, kind of a vanilla one on managing your email inbox. And of course, I had someone come that had like 100,000 things in his inbox, and I'm like, you are my audience here. I don't know how you live like this, but it's either you have 100,000 or you have a handful. Usually I'm at a handful. So I'll say those are my two most popular training topics when I'm doing productivity and AI. What about all of you? Anything really popular at your libraries?
I would say the marketing, social media, fundraising type thing. I feel like most people don't feel like they have wrapped their heads off. I get a lot of people like, I don't know how to use Canva, that type of thing. I'm not really offering that type of training, but it seems like people gravitate towards it.
Yeah, Canva's a great tool. Adobe Express is another great tool that I've been using for quickie edits. There's a lot out there, and again, yeah, it's hard to keep up, especially as tools start out free and they move to freemium or to paid. It gets a little frustrating.
This
It's
is a
kind of
oh, sorry. No, no, go ahead. Oh, okay. This is a little, it's kind of odd. It's probably one of a little out of the box that not what we do, but kind of like how we do it. So every year we hold a like mini conference, if you will, for SWAN libraries. And some libraries close down, send their whole staff. Some libraries just send a few people here and there. Some directors come, some don't, some send more of their support staff. And what we do is this is our big event of the year. It's our highly attended. We rent out a place and at a school and take over the whole. It's an all-day event. Um, and we base our topics a lot on the feedback of what throughout the year we try to survey our consortia and see what they want to talk about, what they want to hear about, where they want speakers from. This past year, we saw a huge request for um, how librarians can assist the public um, when there are mental health needs. There was a huge push for that. So we had like NAMI involved in a bunch of different organizations, social work, things like that. And then we also offer this as kind of a moment for any of our members to provide topics that perhaps they would want to present on. So we had um, I've spoken before on the working group that run, which are circulation managers, and there's about 8 of them, and not everyone can present or wants to present, but a few of them stepped up and wanted to present on the best practices that they've developed through the year. And so you'll have that. That's always huge and widely attended. Um, and so it also gives like members an opportunity to maybe dip their toe in presenting without, it being at this huge conference or, supremely intimidating or anything like that. So it's a smaller scale, but we've seen that getting the membership feedback and letting that kind of really drive our topics while still keeping it in line with, what we can offer where, an ILS here we're providing the functionality of your ILS. So we'll do training on our catalog and we'll do training on, how to get your reports and things like that for new fun reports or things that you might be interested in. We moved the whole way we do patron notifications for overdues and things like that. And so we'll do training surrounding that. And we also, with the catalog, um, how to create browse categories and make it fun and, entertaining for the patrons to look at, have something that's changing and stuff. So that's one of our like bigger things that we do that gets a lot of attendance, but it's never like one topic. It's always like a hodgepodge of all the stuff, the things that they're requesting and kind of these, if we got a new feature in our catalog or we have a new feature in our notifications that they can change or they can, take some ownership over and put a different logo or something like that, we try to have those as well based off the platforms that we support for them. But yeah, that's kind of like our most highly attended and kind of talked about. Otherwise, we try to incorporate like little training here and there at almost every single membership meeting that we have or any like user groups that we have as well. So that's always we just kind of like poke it in there and kind of step back. So um but yeah, that's our big one, I think.
Alice, did you have something that you wanted to contribute?
Yeah, mine is like so vanilla. I think like I am it's gonna probably to everybody who's been doing this a long time, you're gonna all say like, yeah, obviously. But and I kind of thought that myself too, but it's interesting to see how much this is coming up. I'm in the middle of doing a staff-wide survey right now just to like how comfortable do you feel with these areas or is there some training you need? Just that sort of thing trying to dip into like workplace culture a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit here and there. And the one that I think well, maybe not every respondent so far, but it feels like every respondent is just anything like help any sort of like our patron facing equipment, like, like scan, fax, all that sort of stuff, helping people with, and like any of our ILS system. Um, it's just tech stuff. I think sometimes either it's retaining or there's just things that you didn't always get, or there's different things here and there. I think it feels like it's going to be like an evergreen thing that kind of pops up in this position. But yeah, I was just surprised to see how widespread it is. Woo.
Alice, that kind of reminded me that we did this big survey. We hired consultants so that we'd kind of have a third party, and we hoped that they would write a better survey than we would do. I don't know if that really came out, but what I saw a lot as the CE person is there was a lot of comments about CE. And what I saw a lot of was kind of what you were talking about. A lot of people talking about, I miss the practical training. And honestly, it's true. I lean towards like futures thinking and strategic planning and even some of the AI stuff, some kind of bigger things that like aren't like what you might be using every day. So I kind of had to look at those results and say, okay, well maybe we do need to focus a little bit more on the Google Workspace type stuff and the type of things you're talking about with the ILS. We're lucky that our ILS kind of has its own, technical services group. They have their own meetings, they have their own training. So I don't really have to delve into those things. But again, what you're seeing is just the practical stuff that's really going to help them with their daily job.
I do think, though, pushing people along further into something that's new, like AI, we put out like a staff engagement newsletter every month, and depending on the need, we'll put in an exercise or a tip or something like that. And I think when I do push out training about AI, I think I'll probably take it from that vantage point of like, try this thing, use this link, try this thing. Like, it's just too much. It's too much for people who feel, I think, overloaded, unless they're already excited about it to learn it. It feels like a lot of a learning curve. But if you show them, open a chat GPT link and put your email string in there and see what comes out, like that's an exercise. And so I know micro learning was a buzzword not long ago. That's kind of an example of that. And so that way you can combine the best of what you're interested in and then make it, I guess, absorbable and practical in that way. And kind of develop an appetite for it amongst everybody. But it is hard. It is an ask. They need to know what's in it for them, what's in it for them, what's in it for them, or else they don't see. But we also have, a IT group that manages the ILS, and occasionally there'll be a training change. And we don't provide necessarily all the everything, but we might help them with the documentation and the language and the communicating because it's a different style. Like, just the way they chunk material or the way they put out information might not be absorbable, by our readers. So we kind of step in and do help with that. So that's interesting.
I enjoy that tension between we need to learn the stuff we're using every day and the stuff that's coming down the line. I specialize in instructional design, instructional technology, and people are like, "Oh, aren't you always doing the latest and greatest?" I'm like, "I have no money. No." And I think there's also a tendency for us to forget the more advanced we get in technology, there's still people that need to learn the basics, but also need to know what's coming down the pipeline. So it's always, how do you find that balance? I'll never forget when I had a weekend reference shift as a librarian at a student that wanted to look up this article on the microfilm machine, not microfiche, but microfilm. I could not figure it out. She was not happy. And she was like, "What do I do if this happens again?" I'm like, "Find a newer article." You don't need this article for your basic English 101 paper. I'm just saying. Anyways, we've got 2 more minutes. Any last thoughts or requests for advice? What all do you got before we wrap this up?
I just want to say I appreciate everything that everybody has put in the chat, especially Casey, that was your outline of your onboarding, like that sort of thing. All that stuff is super helpful to me, so I just super appreciate it.
Most sections have a slide deck. If there's one that you're like, what are you talking about? We could probably show it to you. But you're going to want to probably have your own info that goes there. But yeah, it's adaptations. Like, this is several iterations later. We have a full week version. But this is what we're up to right now. One is that every month, anytime we get a new person, and the other one is the quarterly. Okay, who did we hire this last quarter? Come on in for a more in-depth show and tell.
Love it.
Yeah, there's real great resources in the chat. All right, well, we've got 1 minute left, so I just want to say thank you all so much for being here on this fine Valentine's Day. I enjoyed discussing topics we all love. We will be doing another training exploration TBD, probably in a couple of months, so keep an eye out for that. And meanwhile, we do have events coming up at ALA Annual once again. So if you're going to ALA Annual in Philadelphia, please come and join us. Thank you again all so much for being here. I'll go ahead and stop the recording. You're welcome to stay and hang out and chat a little more if you want.